gangsters doesn't be in school, gangsters don't have no education, they doesn't really study nothing, only just drugs in jail and out.
That is the thinking. How can we repair that psychological, emotional damage that our young men are going through?
Instead of sitting in a classroom, 17-year-old John now sits at the Grand Bacolet Juvenile Rehabilitation and Treatment Center. This center in St. Andrew can be considered a detention center for juveniles in conflict with the law. John is serving 9 months after being sentenced by a juvenile court for committing acts of housebreaking, stealing, and drug possession. This is not John's first time at Grand Bacolet. He has seen the inside of the facility before when he was charged for similar offenses. This teenager, who is yet to lose his youthful features, feels that there is a chance he could turn his life around. At least he says he is willing to try. John grew up in the community of Telescope, located in St. Andrew, 24.4 kilometers away from the capital city of St. George, a place locally referred to by a group of young men as iScope or Telescope Purple City. Their identity, John says, is centered around the color purple, and was heavily influenced by the United States Blood and Crip gang cultures. This footage of gang activity in Telescope is a grim reminder of the worsening state of young men who have resorted to life on the streets, many of whom came from dysfunctional homes with little or no parental supervision, especially not having a positive male role model or father figure. John, being no exception, is not immune to the allure of affiliating with gang culture. He recalls being quickly captivated by life on the streets, and it was that culture that lured him out of school. John claims he was influenced by older male cousins to follow gang culture. This would lead him to convince his mother he was attending school. Instead, John was spending all of his days on the block. By the age of 15, John completely left school.
Back then, when I was growing up, it used to be hard because I didn't have my own way. Anywhere I want to go, I'll go in. I just find I don't want it in school because gangsters doesn't be in school, gangsters don't have no education, they doesn't really study nothing, only just drugs in jail and out. So I say, well, I'll just continue and get in trouble.
Telescope is the largest community in the big parish of St. Andrew, and like many other communities throughout the island, is plagued by poverty. Mike Noel, who is a resident of Telescope, referred to the village as a once neglected community that has recently seen a lot of development taking place over the last few years. However, he pointed to the lingering remnants of decay of the long neglected community, like unsightly, dilapidated and abandoned buildings, which are still much visible. He knows all too well about the everyday struggle of young people in that community. Noel suggests that the options are limited for young men as there are no alternative means of earning a livelihood, and many resort to selling drugs and getting involved in criminal activities. Noel, a self-taught mechanic and entrepreneur who also sees himself as a community organizer, has embarked on several projects to beautify and uplift his surroundings. He also shares a passion for mentorship.
When you take a kid or a youth and you grow him in an environment where all he's seeing is negativity, that becomes, from very small, it becomes a programming.
In addition to the higher levels of poverty and unemployment, many within his community have grown to normalize their experience. But with a community like Telescope, where there was no functioning community center until recently, many young people have no other choice but to subject themselves to the underworld.
But if you take those kids and you start to bring them back to the values that we had once, when you get up, you pray, you go outside, you attend to the yard, you go and see after the animals. Give them things to do that go keep them active positively. And in Telescope for the last couple of years, we have seen that gone away a lot.
Each year, many institutions focus on academic excellence, while inadvertently ignoring the glaring signs of the worsening reality of academic underachievement, especially among males. The extent of the gender disparity concerning academic underachievement is quite evident within the primary schools when looking at the Caribbean Primary Exit Assessment Summary Report. In 2002, 149 students were unable to meet the requirement to be advanced to a secondary school. The 2017 edition of the Statistical Digest, which contains data as far back as 2006, also paints a similar picture of the true extent of male underachievement. According to that report obtained from the Ministry of Education, the highest percentage of male repeaters in primary schools was recorded between 2011 and 2012, where 78.8% of the students kept back were males. In that same period, male secondary school repeaters stood at 68.9% males. The dropout rate also serves as a reminder that male students are struggling. So what are the factors contributing to male academic underachievement? And is there a correlation between boys' underperformance and the high male prison population? In March of 2023, there were 15 young people between the ages of 14 and 17 at the Grand Bacolet Juvenile Rehabilitation and Treatment Center. These are 11 boys and 4 girls. These young people were referred to the center on the order of a juvenile court after being convicted of various offenses. These offenses range from theft, drugs, violent harm offenses, and deviant behaviors. The total population at the Juvenile Rehabilitation and Treatment Center is said to be the lowest on record, compared to just a few years ago when the center housed more than 40 residents, including 33 boys and 8 girls. Many of these were high school dropouts. From a cursory glance at the numbers, a gender gap can be observed where boys caught up in the juvenile justice system outnumber that of girls, a worrying trend that can also be seen at the nation's lone prison facility, where the incarceration of men is significantly higher than that of women. According to statistics provided by the island's lone adult prison, the Richmond Hill Prison, out of a total prison population of 384, only 3 are females. Many of the men institutionalized at the prison either did not attain a secondary education or did not complete their primary or secondary education. Now, to answer the question previously asked, let's travel to the rural parish of St. Andrew, listed by a 2017 UNICEF report as one of 2 parishes considered to have some of the most impoverished villages. In that report, the parish of St. Andrew was said to have 44% of its people living below the poverty line. But while visible evidence of poverty and inequality in wealth distribution can clearly be seen, there exists a more covert societal dilemma of epic proportions, which is the worsening state of mental poverty facing its youthful population, especially among young men.
That is the thinking. How can we repair that psychological, emotional damage that our young men are going through? How many young men today think that by 25 are dead already? And it's happening because a lot of young people are dying or in prison. Males. Can we disabuse them of that mindset?
Dr. Graves was quick to point out that there is also a marriage between male underachievement and criminality.
But while our society abhors failure, it really perpetuates failure. And it perpetuates failure through the education system and generally through the socialization process of our males. I think that our society, I know our society has failed males.
A snapshot of the situation in Grenada regarding juvenile crime was also highlighted in a UNICEF report, Regional Analysis of Country Submitted Data, conducted in 2015, covering 5 years between 2009 and 2013. According to the data, the cumulative total of juvenile arrests between the ages of 9 and 17 was 1,326, which at the time was the highest on record of children charged annually among the 10 reporting countries. The report showed that more boys than girls were charged with offenses in 2014, and boys were 5.8 times more likely to be charged than girls. At the Grand Bacolet Juvenile Rehabilitation and Treatment Center, juveniles sentenced by the court are referred to as residents, not inmates. The aim is to focus on removing the stigma of being incarcerated for criminal offenses. Prior to the establishment of the facility in 2015, juveniles were sentenced to the adult prison. Life for the children at the facility is made as comfortable as possible, since many of these young people before entering experience high levels of abuse. During their detention, residents are required to participate in many of the rehabilitation programs that seek to provide some structure to their lives. This includes returning to school and preparing to sit their CSEC examination, since the literacy and numeracy skills of these young boys are below the required levels. Andy Matthew is a social worker and youth advocate at the Grand Bacolet Juvenile Rehabilitation and Treatment Center. He says he is saddened by the harsh reality that faces some of the young residents. He pointed out that despite the facility's best efforts at rehabilitation, many of the residents would probably return to life as it was. Many of the residents come from homes where male role models are absent. They also come from poor households, many with single mothers. Matthew feels that the role of poverty plays in perpetuating crime cannot be ignored, since many of the young people would not be in the facility if their basic needs were being met at home.
And a lot of the times the stealing is for food, the basic needs, which shows that their needs are not being met. So yes, we might blame this child for doing that, but if their needs were being met, would they be in that position? So there I look at cause and effect.
Matthew said the main focus at the facility is to instill discipline and structure, and to lift the self-esteem of these young men and women with the hope that they will have the strength to continue once they return to life as normal.
Back in the day, they realized not everybody is academically inclined. So the ones who are not, they had the opportunity to do their little woodwork or their mechanics, and they would excel, which gave them a sense of pride. Because for them, they were achieving something. Now, if this child remains where he's underachieving and everybody is looking at him, he can't do the work. If he was given the opportunity, like in the skill base, then it will give him a sense of pride, which make him want to do it more with his life.
At the island's lone adult prison, where 60 to 70% of male prisoners are between the ages of 19 and 35, inmates are encouraged to change their life around by getting involved in some of the mentorship and training programs. These programs include basic literacy, anger management, and counseling. Inmates also learn skills in areas such as electrical installation, general agriculture, and refrigeration and air conditioning. But despite having access to these opportunities, only 20% of the inmates take part. This low percentage of inmates opting to take part in training programs continues to fuel the recidivism rate of repeat offenders, which is as high as 75%, while only the recidivism rate for inmates involved in the rehab programs is just 15%. This reality is quite troubling for Christopher Shroud, a social worker at the Richmond Hill Prison.
But in relation to the male inmates, you would find almost about 60-70% of them functionally literate, just could get by, all right? You would also find a situation where most of them, the guys, they are not skilled. So you might find about maybe a 10 or 15% of them with skill. Now, if the only skill you have is the skill I bring inside here, then you'll keep returning.
In an overcrowded and understaffed prison facility, inmates are also not mandated to take part in any of the programs offered at the prison. Therefore, it is solely left up to the individual to take advantage of the opportunity. Shroud said the mandate to make these programs compulsory for inmates lies with the court system. One organization is attempting to change the tide regarding male underachievement and incarceration. Adult and Teen Challenge Initiative has been in existence since 2019 and has so far instituted early intervention, drug prevention, and drug rehabilitation programs that are geared towards preventing these troubled youth from entering the prison system. Currently, the organization is working with 52 at-risk youth who are all high school dropouts in getting them certified in 3 CVQ areas, which include rabbit rearing, crop production, and beekeeping. Executive Director Jude Hector is pleased to report that 44 out of 52 males enrolled in the program have already found jobs, with 6 having started their businesses. However, he said in order to make a serious dent in the recidivism rate at the prison, there must be an even earlier intervention in the homes of these troubled youths.
One of the role models that our present generation of fathers are seeing, and again, that's where the cycle comes in. Now, if a young man does not have a relationship with his dad, and now he's having children, then he has no reference point to be a good dad, right? So I would suggest that we begin to look at the role models that guys who are bearing children, who's their role models?
Meanwhile, for the male residents at the Grand Bacolet Juvenile Rehabilitation and Treatment Center, the environment that led them to commit crime still exists once they leave the safety of the institution, and it therefore requires an all-societal approach to ensure that they are protected and cared for, because unless this is done, these spiraling acts of juvenile crimes will continue.
As men, we tend to learn in different ways to women. Maybe the teaching that we have now in the schools are more conducive to the way that women are able to learn. So maybe these are the things that we have to start looking, but we have to be looking at things for our young men. The way that we approach our young men, the way that we speak to our young men. We need to, I know it seems like a cop-out. However, if we want to change things, we have to look at ourselves as well.
17-year-old John is scheduled to be released back into society in May of 2023. And social worker at the facility, Andy Matthew, is confident that based on the young man's progression, he will be in a better position to navigate away from a life of crime.